She pointed at me with her shaking hand and said, "You pay for what your father did." I didn't know what she meant. I didn't even know who she was. But that moment changed everything. It happened in my father's village, where I hadn't been since I was a child. He had passed away a few months earlier, and it was my responsibility to visit the family and settle some disputes over his land. The old woman appeared the day I arrived. She was sitting under a large baobab tree near the market, her face stained and weathered like she'd lived through 100 lifetimes. I noticed her because she kept staring at me. Her eyes followed me as I walked through the market, speaking to uncles and cousins I barely remembered. The next day, as I was walking along the road beside the baobab tree, she stood up and blocked my path. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. Her voice was raspy, almost a whisper. "No, Mama," I said politely, though I was uneasy. She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Your father knew me well." I was confused. My father had never mentioned her, not once. But before I could say anything, she raised her hand, pointed at me, and said those words, "You pay for what your father did." It wasn't just her words, it was the way she said them. Like it wasn't a threat, but a fact. I brushed it off, or at least I tried to. People in the village always said strange things. But when I got back to the family house, my aunt's face went pale when I told her what happened. "That woman is trouble," she said. "Stay away from her." "Who is she?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "Her name is Adisa. She's a widow." "Your father, well, he wasn't kind to her." "What do you mean?" She didn't answer directly, only saying, "Your father took her land years ago. She's been bitter ever since." I didn't think much of it. Family disputes over land were common, and my father wasn't around to defend himself. But that night, things started happening. At first, it was small. A pot of water I left on the table tipped over by itself. My phone, which was fully charged, suddenly died. But then, at midnight, I heard the banging. It came from outside the house. Slow, deliberate knocks, like someone hitting the walls with a stick. I got up and went to the window. No one was there. I went back to bed, but the banging moved to the roof. It was louder now, like someone was stomping across the tiles. I opened the door and looked up. Nothing. Just the dark sky and the rustling of leaves. The next day, I told my aunt. She shook her head. "You should apologize to her." "For what?" "I didn't do anything." "It's not about you," she said. "It's about your father. She thinks his blood runs through you, and that makes you guilty." I didn't believe her. I wasn't going to apologize for something I didn't do. But the banging didn't stop. Every night, it got worse. One night, I woke up to find my room filled with the smell of burning wood, but there was no fire. Another time, I heard whispers outside my door, though no one was there. On the fourth night, I broke. I went to the baobab tree where I had first seen her. She was there, sitting like she'd been waiting for me. "I don't know what my father did to you," I said, swallowing my pride. "But I'm sorry if he hurt you." She looked at me, her white eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "It's not me you should be sorry for. It's the land." "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. She stood up and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. The banging stopped after that, but I didn't feel relieved. When I went to bed that night, I dreamed of a large field, dry and cracked like it hadn't seen rain in years. I saw my father standing there, holding a machete, and Adisa crying in the background. When I woke up, I knew what I had to do. I called the family together and told them I was giving the disputed land back to Adisa. My uncles argued, but I didn't care. Something told me this was the only way to make things right. Adisa didn't thank me when I told her. She just nodded and said, "Your father would never have done this." I don't know if it's over, but I haven't heard the banging since. Still, I can't help but wonder, how much of my father's past am I still carrying with me?